Hey guys, tonight we are going to stand on the edge of the impossible. We are going to look down into the deep ravines and rushing rivers of the ancient world and ask ourselves a question that makes modern engineers uncomfortable. How is this still standing? We often think of the past as a time of primitive struggle, a time when people lived in mud huts and feared the thunder. But when we look at the bridges they left behind, structures that have survived floods, earthquakes, wars, and the slow, grinding erosion of millennia, we have to admit something humbling. They knew things we have forgotten. They built with a permanence that we can scarcely imagine. Tonight we are going to walk across these stone spines that connect the ancient world. We will touch the cold granite, smell the volcanic ash in the mortar, and try to understand the minds that looked at a violent river and decided to put a leash on it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from and what time it is for you. It is always fascinating to see who is joining us from around the world to share in these quiet moments of history. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Let go of the stress of your modern day, the emails, the notifications, the constant noise of the present. Instead, let your mind drift back to a time of stone and silence, where the only sound is the rushing of water and the rhythmic strike of a hammer against a chisel. Imagine for a moment that you are a traveller in the year 100 AD. You are walking along a dusty road in the province of Lusitania, which we now know as Spain. The sun is beating down on your neck, hot and relentless. You have been walking for days through rugged, unforgiving terrain. The landscape is wild, a chaotic mix of scrubland and jagged rocks, but then the road straightens. The dust seems to settle, and ahead of you, spanning a massive gorge over the Tagus River, you see it. The Bridge of Alcantara. It doesn't look like something built by human hands. It looks like it was carved by the gods themselves and dropped into place. It rises nearly 200 feet above the river, a soaring arch of granite blocks, held together not by mortar, but by gravity and precision alone. As you walk onto it, you feel a strange sensation. It is not fear, it is stability. The bridge feels more solid than the ground you just walked on. You look up and see an inscription carved into the central arch, a message left by the architect, Gaius Julius Lasser. It reads, Pontem perpetui mansurum in saecula mundi. I have built a bridge that will last forever. This was not arrogance. It was a statement of fact, and he was right. That bridge is still there today, carrying cars and trucks over the same river that Roman legions once marched across. This is the paradox of ancient engineering. We live in a world of planned obsolescence, where our phones die in 2 years, and our buildings are designed to last maybe 50. But the ancients built for eternity. They didn't just want to cross a river, they wanted to conquer it. They wanted to prove that human will was stronger than nature itself. Tonight we are going to explore how they did it. We are going to look at the impossible logistics, the lost technologies, and the sheer human cost of these megastructures, because behind every silent stone arch there is a story of sweat, blood, and a kind of genius that borders on madness. To understand the impossible bridge, you first have to understand the Roman mind. For the Romans, a bridge wasn't just infrastructure, it was a weapon. It was a tool of psychological warfare. When Julius Caesar arrived at the banks of the Rhine River in 55 BC, he was facing a problem. The Germanic tribes on the other side felt safe. They believed the massive, wide, fast-flowing river was an impenetrable shield. They mocked Caesar from the safety of the eastern bank. No Roman had ever crossed it. It was considered the edge of the world. Caesar could have built boats. He could have ferried his troops across, but that wasn't the Roman way. Boats were for traders. Boats were unstable. Caesar wanted to send a message. He wanted to show the Germanic tribes that Rome could walk on water. So he ordered his engineers to build a bridge, not in a year, not in a month, but in 10 days. Picture the scene. You are a legionary, exhausted from marching. You are standing on the muddy bank of a river that is churning with snowmelt from the Alps. The current is violent, dragging trees and debris with it. And your commander tells you that you are going to drive massive timber piles into the bed of this river. You don't have cranes, you don't have hydraulic hammers. You have muscle, rope, and gravity. The engineers design a pile driver, a primitive but effective machine floating on a raft. They winch a massive stone up into the air and drop it. Thud. Again. Thud. Day and night, the sound of the pile driver echoes through the valley, a slow, rhythmic heartbeat of industrial terror. The tribes on the other side watched in silence. At first, they probably laughed. But as the days passed and the timber structure began to rise from the water, the laughter stopped. They saw the Romans driving piles not vertically, but at an angle, leaning against the current to brace for the force of the water. They saw them installing fenders upstream to catch debris before it could smash into the supports. This was engineering as intimidation. In 10 days, a bridge that could hold 40,000 soldiers appeared out of thin air. When Caesar marched his legions across, the tribes didn't fight. They fled. They vanished into the forests. They weren't scared of the soldiers. They were scared of the people who could tame a river in a week. After 18 days of exploring and burning a few villages, Caesar marched back across and dismantled the bridge. He didn't need it anymore. The point had been made. Rome could go anywhere, but timber was just the beginning. The true impossible bridges are the ones made of stone, the ones that defy the erosion of time, and the secret to their survival lies in a material that we are still trying to fully understand: Roman concrete. If you were a builder in the modern world, you would use Portland cement. It's strong, it dries fast, and it's reliable. But it has a weakness. Salt water eats it. Over time, the ocean seeps into the cracks, rusts the steel reinforcement, and the concrete crumbles. We are constantly repairing our bridges. The Romans, however, didn't have this problem. They invented a type of concrete that didn't just survive in seawater, it actually got stronger over time. Imagine you are standing in the harbour of Caesarea or peering at the foundations of the Bridge of Augustus. The workers are mixing a strange grey sludge. It looks like mud, but it is a precise chemical cocktail. They use volcanic ash, specifically pozzolana, from the area around Mount Vesuvius. They mix it with lime and chunks of volcanic rock. And then they do something insane. They pour it directly into the sea. In our world, water ruins concrete before it sets. But in the Roman world, the seawater triggers a chemical reaction. The lime and the volcanic ash react with the salt to form a rare mineral called tobermorite. Crystals begin to grow inside the concrete, interlocking like microscopic armour. As the waves crash against it, the concrete doesn't erode. It mineralizes, it becomes rock. This is why we still have Roman piers and bridge foundations today, 2,000 years later, while our modern coastal highways are crumbling after 50 years. They worked with nature, not against it. They used the chemistry of the earth to build structures that were meant to be part of the geology. But the material was only half the battle. The real challenge was the arch. The arch is the spine of the ancient world. It is a shape that loves gravity. When you stand under a Roman bridge, you are standing under tons of stone that want to fall down, but can't. The weight of the bridge pushes downward, but the wedge-shaped stones of the arch redirect that force sideways into the massive piers and abutments on the riverbanks. The stones are squeezing each other. The heavier the load you put on the bridge, the tighter the stones lock together. It is a brilliant system, but building it is a nightmare. To build an arch over a river, you first have to build a wooden frame called a centering that mimics the shape of the arch. You have to build a temporary wooden bridge just to build the permanent stone bridge. And you have to do this while the river is fighting you. You have to divert the water, build cofferdams, watertight enclosures, pump them dry using Archimedes screws turned by exhausted slaves, and dig down to the bedrock. It was dangerous, wet, miserable work. Men drowned, men were crushed. But the machine of the empire didn't care. The bridge had to be built. Let's go back to the Alcantara Bridge for a moment. Stand there in the twilight. The wind is blowing through the ravine. The stone feels cool under your hand. You realise that there is no mortar between these stones, no glue, just friction and perfect cutting. The blocks are massive, some weighing up to 8 tons. How did they lift them? They used human-powered cranes, treadmills where men would walk inside a giant wooden wheel, winding up ropes and pulleys. It was slow, grueling work. Every stone had to be perfect. If one block was uneven, the pressure would be unequal, and the arch could shatter. But they didn't shatter. They held. And it wasn't just about function. These bridges were sacred. In early Rome, the high priest was called the Pontifex Maximus. That literally means the greatest bridge builder. The connection between the divine and the engineering was absolute. A bridge was a violation of the natural order. Rivers were considered gods. To cross a river without getting wet was to insult the river god. So building a bridge was a religious act. You had to appease the water. You had to offer sacrifices. You had to ensure that what you built was worthy of the landscape. This is why Roman bridges are beautiful. They didn't just build a flat road. They built monuments. They added triumphal arches at the ends. They inscribed their names. They treated infrastructure like art. But as the sun sets on the Roman Empire in our imagination, we have to look further. Because while the Romans were masters of the stone arch on the other side of the world, in a landscape far more hostile, another civilization was building bridges that defy logic in a completely different way. Imagine a mountain range so steep that the clouds are below your feet. The air is thin. There are no flat roads, only vertical cliffs. Stone arches are impossible here. The earthquakes would snap them in half. The canyons are too wide. And yet, the Inca Empire connected thousands of miles of impossible terrain. They didn't use stone for their bridges. They used grass. But before we cross the ocean to the Andes, we must linger a moment longer in the shadow of the Roman giants. We must appreciate the sheer hubris of a civilization that believed it could pave the world. Think of the Bridge of Narni, which once carried the Flaminian Way. Its central arch was over 100 feet high. It was a skyscraper in the shape of a bridge, or the Pont de Garde in France, an aqueduct that is essentially a triple-decker bridge designed to carry water with a gradient so precise that it drops only 1 inch for every 3,000 feet. If you look closely at the stones of the Pont de Garde, you can still see the marks of the tools. You can see the numbers carved into the blocks by the quarrymen, instructions on where each piece should go. It's like a giant Lego set made of limestone. These structures create a feeling of the uncanny valley for modern observers. They are too big, too old, and too perfect. We look at them and we feel small. We feel the fleeting nature of our own lives. The men who built these, the slaves, the soldiers, the architects, are dust. Their names mostly forgotten. Even the empire they served has crumbled into history books. But the bridge remains. It still spans the water. It still does its job. It is a testament to the idea that if you build something with enough care, with enough mass, and with enough respect for the laws of physics, you can cheat death. You can leave a mark that lasts longer than your language, your religion, or your nation. As night falls over the Tagus River, the silhouette of the Alcantara Bridge turns black against the purple sky. The water rushes below, eternal and indifferent. The bridge stands above it, silent and unmoving. It has seen Visigoths, Moors, Christians, and Napoleonic armies. It has been damaged by war and repaired by peace, but its core remains Roman. It is a ghost of the past that we can still touch. And as we prepare to leave the Roman world behind, we have to wonder, did they know? Did Gaius Julius Caesar really know that his bridge would last forever, or was he just hoping? Perhaps he knew that stone doesn't forget, but stone is heavy, stone is rigid. What happens when the world requires flexibility? What happens when you need to cross a chasm that is terrifyingly deep, where the ground shakes, and where the only materials you have are the fibres of plants growing on the hillside? The Romans conquered the horizontal world with compression and weight, but to conquer the vertical world of the Andes, the Incas had to master something else entirely: tension. They had to learn how to weave the impossible out of thin air, and that is where we are going next. Into the clouds, where bridges don't stand on the ground, but hang from the sky. Welcome to the roof of the world. You are standing 12,000 feet above sea level in the Peruvian Andes. The air here is thin, crisp, and cold enough to sting your lungs with every breath. If you look down, you don't see a riverbank. You see an abyss. The Apurimac River boils and churns nearly 100 feet below you, cutting through the dark rock like a jagged knife. In this landscape, the Roman arch is useless. The ground here moves. Earthquakes shudder through these mountains with terrifying regularity. A rigid stone bridge would crack and crumble into the gorge within a generation. The Inca engineers, the masters of this vertical empire, understood that, to survive here, you cannot fight the mountain. You have to move with it. You have to be flexible. And so, to cross the uncrossable, they didn't look to the quarry. They looked to the ground, at the tufts of coarse yellow grass waving in the wind. It seems insane to build a bridge capable of holding armies, llamas, and gold out of nothing but grass. But the Queshuachaca, the last remaining Inca rope bridge, proves otherwise. The secret lies in the power of multiplication. Pick up a single blade of Ichu grass. It is brittle. You can snap it between your fingers. But twist it together with another and another and another, and the physics change. The friction between the fibres creates a bond stronger than the plant itself. Imagine sitting in a circle with the villagers of the Andes. Your hands are raw and calloused. For days you have been pounding the grass with stones to soften it, soaking it in water and twisting it. It is a rhythmic, hypnotic motion. Twist, tuck, pull, twist, tuck, pull. You are making a thin cord, no thicker than a finger. This is the DNA of the bridge. These small cords are then twisted together to form a thicker rope, and those ropes are braided together to form a massive cable, as thick as a human thigh and heavy as a fallen tree. These are the muscles of the bridge. It takes thousands of people to make these cables. It is a communal tax, a labour of devotion known as minka. When the cables are ready, the old bridge, the one that has hung over the gorge for the last year, is cut down. It falls into the river below, a sacrifice to the water, carrying the dust and footprints of the past year away. The new cables are carried to the edge. They are heavy, smelling of dried earth and llama tallow used to grease them. The bridge master, a man who holds the knowledge of centuries in his hands, oversees the most dangerous part, passing the first line across the void. Once the main cables are secured to massive stone abutments anchored deep into the mountain rock, the bridge master walks out over the open air. He is suspended by nothing but tension. He weaves the floor of the bridge, lashing small sticks and more grass between the cables. working from both sides to meet in the middle. He is building the road as he walks on it. There are no safety nets, just the wind howling through the canyon and the river waiting below. When the bridge is finished, it is a living thing. It sags in the middle, a golden curve against the grey rock. When you step onto it, it breathes. It sways with your weight. It creaks and groans, adjusting to the pressure. It feels terrifyingly fragile, yet it is incredibly strong. These bridges could hold the weight of Spanish conquistadors on horseback, fully armoured, though the Spaniards were often so terrified of the swaying grass that they crawled across on their hands and knees, praying to their God to save them from this devil's web. This is engineering through tension, not compression. It is the exact opposite of the Roman philosophy. The Romans built to leave a monument that would never change. The Incas built with the understanding that everything dies and must be reborn. The grass bridge rots. The rain weakens it. The sun dries it out. So every year they destroy it and build it again. It is a cycle of eternal renewal. The bridge is never old because it is always being born. It is a technology that requires a community to exist. If the people stop working together, the bridge falls. It is infrastructure as a social contract. But why build them? Why go to such terrifying lengths to connect these peaks? Because the Inca Empire, the Tawantinsuyu, was an empire of speed. Without the wheel, without horses, they relied on the most efficient machine in the Andes, the human runner. They were called chasquis. These men were the internet of the ancient world. Stationed in small huts along the 25,000 miles of Inca roads, they were trained from childhood to run at high altitudes. A chasqui would see another runner approaching in the distance, blowing a conch shell trumpet to signal his arrival. He would run out to meet him, memorize the message, or take the quipu, a system of knotted strings used to record data, and sprint to the next station. Imagine being a chasqui. You are chewing coca leaves to numb the hunger and the fatigue. Your lungs are burning in the thin air. You are running along a path carved into a sheer cliff face, a drop of 1,000 feet just inches to your left. You reach the grass bridge. You don't slow down. You sprint across the swaying cables, the bridge bouncing under your rhythm, the wind trying to throw you off. You are carrying news of a rebellion or orders for a movement of troops, or perhaps even fresh fish from the coast for the emperor's dinner in Cusco. Because of these bridges and these runners, a message could travel 150 miles in a single day. That is faster than the mounted mail systems of Europe at the same time. The Inca commanded an empire of mountains because they turned gravity into an ally. They didn't flatten the world, they stitched it together. But the grass bridges are just the surface of Andean genius. If you look closer at the stone walls that anchored these bridges, you see something even more baffling. We have all seen the pictures of Machu Picchu or Sacsayhuaman, the massive polygonal stones fitting together like a jigsaw puzzle. But do you really understand what you are looking at? These are not bricks. They are irregular, multi-ton boulders of granite and andesite. Some weigh over 100 tons, and yet they are fitted so perfectly that you cannot slide a piece of paper between them. There is no mortar, no glue, just stone hugging stone. How? They didn't have iron tools. They didn't have the wheel. They didn't have laser levels. They had stone hammers, bronze chisels, and infinite patience. Theories abound. Some say they used a system of scribing, copying the shape of the rock below onto the rock above, then pounding it away dust mote by dust mote until it fit. Others suggest they used acid from plants to soften the stone, though that remains a fringe theory. The most likely reality is far more grueling. It was labour, massive, coordinated, back-breaking labour. They would hoist a stone up, check the fit, lower it, chip away the high spots, and hoist it up again, hundreds of times for a single block. And they designed these walls to dance. When an earthquake hits the Andes, The ground moves like a liquid. A rigid wall snaps. But an Inca wall? The stones rattle. They shake. They move slightly in their sockets, dissipating the energy of the quake. And then, when the shaking stops, they settle back into their perfect puzzle piece positions. It is seismic isolation, invented 1,000 years before modern architects thought of it. The Spanish conquistadors, in their arrogance, often tore down the top halves of Inca temples to build their own cathedrals and colonial houses. When the earthquakes came, the Spanish buildings collapsed. The Inca walls beneath them didn't move. They stood there, silent and mocking, holding up the ruins of their conquerors. There is a deep melancholy in looking at these structures. We see the triumph of the mind, but we also sense the cost of the body. The meter system, the mandatory labour tax of the Inca, meant that millions of hours of human life were poured into these rocks. People lived and died just to shape a single corner of a fortress. Their names are lost. We don't know the name of the architect who designed Machu Picchu. We don't know the name of the bridge master who wove the first cable across the Apurimac. We only have the work. As we descend from the thin air of the Andes, leaving behind the swaying grass bridges and the puzzle walls of the Inca, we find ourselves craving something more solid, yet equally impossible. We have seen how the Romans conquered the horizontal with arches, and how the Incas conquered the vertical with tension. But there is another challenge that ancient engineers faced, a challenge not of height or distance, but of sheer overwhelming mass. How do you move a stone that is so heavy, so impossibly large, that even modern cranes would struggle to lift it? We are leaving the mountains now. The air is getting warmer, heavier. We are travelling east to a place where the sun beats down on a valley of cedar trees and ancient ruins. We are going to Baalbek in modern-day Lebanon. Here, buried in the foundations of a Roman temple, lie 3 stones known as the trilithon. They are not just big, they are monsters. Each one weighs 800 tons. That is the equivalent of 3 Boeing 747s compressed into a single block of limestone. And they are not sitting on the ground. They are lifted 20 feet into the air, placed perfectly side by side in a wall. The Romans claimed them. They built a temple to Jupiter on top of them. But there is a mystery here that makes the skin crawl. The quarry where these stones came from is less than a mile away, and in that quarry lies another stone, one that was never finished, the stone of the pregnant woman. It weighs 1,000 tons, and beside it an even larger one, discovered recently, weighing 1,600 tons. Why? Why would anyone carve a block of stone that big? How did they plan to move it? And most hauntingly, who stopped them? Our are standing in the Bekaa Valley, and the silence here is different from the Andes. It is heavy, hot and thick with the scent of cedar and dry limestone dust. Before you lies the answer to what kind of god demands such a sacrifice of labour. Jupiter Optimus Maximus, the supreme deity of the Roman pantheon. But the stones here, at the site, the Greeks called Heliopolis, and we call Baalbek, whisper of something older, something primal that the Romans merely adopted and supersized. You walk up to the trilithon, those 3 colossal blocks of stone set into the western wall of the temple podium. Standing at the base, you feel a profound sense of vertigo, not from height, but from scale. The seam between the stones is invisible. You run your hand over the limestone. It is cool, smooth, and utterly indifferent to your presence. These blocks are not just construction materials, they are geological events. To understand how they got here, you have to walk a mile back to the quarry. Here lies the Hajar al-Hibla, the stone of the pregnant woman. It is still attached to the bedrock at its base, a sleeping giant that was never woken. It is rectangular, sharp-edged and terrifyingly massive. If you climbed onto it, You would look like an ant on a loaf of bread. Why was it left? Some say the Roman engineers, in a rare moment of humility, realised they had finally gone too far, that they had carved a stone so heavy, over 1,000 tons, that not even the might of the empire could drag it to the temple. It remains there as a monument to the limit of human ambition. But the 3 stones that did make it to the temple wall are the ones that haunt us. 800 tons, moved, lifted, set. Forget the aliens. The truth is far more impressive and far more brutal. It is a story of friction warfare. To move an 800-ton block, you first have to defeat the ground. If you put that stone on soil, it sinks. If you put it on stone, it grinds to a halt. So the engineers built a road, a solid paved highway from the quarry to the temple, specifically for these monsters. But you can't just drag stone on stone. You need rollers. Thousands of tree trunks, stripped of bark, hardened by fire and perfectly round. And you need a lubricant, not oil. That's too expensive for a project this size. You use wet clay or ox fat, or perhaps the crushed sludge of wet rollers that have already failed. Imagine the sound. It is not the whip cracks of Hollywood movies. It is the deep, agonizing groan of wood under intolerable pressure. The rollers scream as they are crushed into the pavement. The capstans, massive vertical winches turned by teams of men pushing wooden bars, creak and snap. You are one of the thousands of men on the ropes. You are not pulling directly. You are turning the capstan. You are walking in a circle, over and over, hour after hour, pushing against the resistance of a mountain that does not want to move. The dust coats your throat. The sun blisters your skin. If one rope snaps, the recoil can cut a man in half. If the stone gains momentum downhill, it will crush anything in its path. It is a slow, synchronized dance of extreme danger. The foreman beats a drum, not for music, but for survival. Boom, step, boom, push. If the rhythm breaks, the force becomes uneven, the stone skews, and weeks of work are lost in seconds. But moving it horizontally is one thing, lifting it is another. The trilithon stones are situated 20 feet up in the wall. How? The Romans had cranes, yes. The polyspastos, a crane with a treadwheel, powered by men walking inside it, could lift 6 tons, maybe 10. But 800? A crane would snap like a twig. The answer is likely buried under the very ground you are imagining. They didn't lift the stones, they buried the temple. They built a massive earthen ramp, a gentle slope of packed earth and gravel that grew as the wall grew. They dragged the stones up the ramp, inch by agonizing inch, until they were slightly above their final resting place. And then, the moment of truth. How do you place an 800-ton block so gently that it sits flush against its neighbour without cracking? You can't just drop it. Enter the sand jack. It is a theory, but it is one of the few that explains the precision. Imagine a chamber carved into the wall below, where the stone needs to sit. You fill that chamber with dry, fine sand. You place a wooden plunger on top of the sand, and you slide the massive stone onto the plunger. The stone is now floating on sand. Then a worker at the bottom of the chamber pulls a plug. The sand begins to flow out, a slow, steady trickle. As the sand level drops, the stone lowers, millimetre by millimetre. It is hydraulic power, but with grains of earth instead of water. The engineer watches the gap close. He signals to stop the flow. He checks the level. He lets a little more sand out. Click. The stone settles. The seam is perfect. The ramp is dug away, and the impossible wall is revealed. This was engineering as a form of worship. The sheer difficulty was the point. If it was easy, it wouldn't be worthy of Jupiter. The Romans were saying, look at what we can do. We can move mountains. But as you walk away from the sun-drenched stones of Baalbek, leaving the heat and the dust behind, you realise that moving mass is only one way to conquer nature. There is a subtler, darker and perhaps more terrifying challenge that ancient engineers faced. It wasn't about rock, it was about water. Water is heavy, water is chaotic, and water is life. To build a city, you need to control it. But to build a secret city, a city that could survive a siege for months or years, you needed to hide the water. You needed to take the rivers and the rain and bury them deep underground, in cathedrals of liquid darkness that no enemy could find. We are leaving the open air now. We are travelling north and west to the crossroads of the world, Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul. We are going underground. Imagine you are standing on a busy street in the 6th century AD. Carts are rattling by, merchants are shouting, but beneath your feet, separated by only a few feet of brick and soil, is a silent black ocean. You find a small, nondescript door and descend a spiral staircase. The air gets cooler, damp. The smell of dust is replaced by the smell of stagnant, mineral-heavy water. You reach the bottom, and your torchlight flickers across a sight that shouldn't exist. You are in a forest of columns, hundreds of them, rising from the black water to support a brick ceiling that stretches away into the gloom. This is the Basilica Cistern. It was built by Emperor Justinian to store filtered water for the Great Palace, but it looks less like a storage tank and more like a submerged temple to a forgotten god. There are 336 marble columns, each 30 feet tall, and here is the strange part. They don't match. The Romans and Byzantines were the ultimate recyclers. They looted temples from across the empire to build this. You row a small boat through the silent, echoing darkness. The water is still, like black glass. You paddle past columns made of green granite, others of white marble, some fluted, some smooth. And then, in the far corner, you see it. 2 columns rest on blocks that are carved into the shape of Medusa's head. One is sideways, one is upside down. Why? Was it to negate the power of the Gorgon's gaze? Was it a superstitious ward against evil spirits polluting the water? Or was it just brutal, practical indifference, a builder realising the block was the right size and not caring that a goddess's face was being pressed into the mud? The upside-down Medusa stares into the black water, her snakes frozen in stone, guarding a treasure that is more valuable than gold, hydration. This cistern could hold 80,000 cubic metres of water, enough to keep the emperor and his court alive, while barbarians raged at the walls above. It is a masterpiece of hidden infrastructure. The acoustic here is terrifying. A single drop of water falling from the vaulted ceiling echoes for seconds, a sharp plink that sounds like a clock ticking down the end of the empire. The engineers who built this had to understand hydrostatics, the pressure of water against walls. They had to waterproof the brick with a special mortar called colossal, crushed brick and lime to prevent leaks. They created a massive artificial cave that felt like a natural wonder. It is peaceful down here, but also oppressive. You feel the weight of the city above you. You feel the thousands of years of history pressing down on the columns. But water management wasn't always about storage. Sometimes it was about pressure. And to see the ultimate mastery of pressure, we have to go back to the Romans, but this time not to a city, but to a gold mine. We are going to Las Medullas in Spain. This is not a building. It is a landscape that was torn apart by engineering. The Romans wanted the gold dust hidden inside the mountains. They didn't want to dig for it with picks. That was too slow. So they invented ruina montium, the ruin of mountains. Picture a mountain covered in trees. Roman engineers spend years digging a network of tunnels inside it, like wormholes in an apple. But these tunnels don't lead to gold veins. They are dead ends. Then they build miles of aqueducts, to channel water from the surrounding rivers into a massive holding tank at the top of the mountain. At a signal, they open the floodgates. The water rushes down, filling the tunnels inside the mountain in seconds. But water cannot be compressed. The air inside the tunnels is trapped. The pressure builds instantly, explosively, and then the mountain explodes. It isn't a bomb. It is hydraulic pressure. The side of the mountain blows out, collapsing into a slurry of mud and rock. The gold is washed free, caught in brushwood filters downstream. It is environmental devastation on an industrial scale performed 2,000 years ago. It is brilliant and it is horrifying. The landscape of Las Medulas today still looks like a jagged red wound in the green earth, a testament to the Roman ability to weaponize physics against the planet itself. We have looked down into gorges and up at stone walls. Now we must look up at the stars, because for some ancient builders the goal wasn't just to survive on Earth. It was to map the heavens and bring the precision of the cosmos down to the ground. We are heading to a place where shadows tell the time, where the sun is an architect, and where a mistake of a single degree meant the failure of a civilization. We are going to the deserts of Egypt and the jungles of Mesoamerica to see how they built clocks made of stone that are still ticking today. The silence of the Nubian desert is louder than the roar of the ocean. It is a vast, baking emptiness, where the wind hisses over endless dunes, and the sun is not a friend, but a tyrant. You are standing on the west bank of the Nile, far to the south, near the border of modern-day Sudan. It is 1244 BC. The heat is shimmering off the sand, distorting the horizon into pools of liquid mercury. Before you stands a mountain of sandstone, burning red in the afternoon light. But this is not a natural formation. The face of the cliff has been sliced away, peeled back like skin to reveal 4 seated giants. Each one is 66 feet tall. They are statues of Ramses II, the pharaoh who decided that mortality was a problem for other people. This is Abu Simbel. It is not a building constructed on the ground. It is a building subtracted from the earth. This is living rock architecture. The engineers didn't stack stones here. They removed everything that wasn't the temple. Imagine the planning required. If a mason made a mistake with a chisel on a block of limestone in a quarry, they could just grab another block. Here, if you chip the nose of the pharaoh, you have ruined the mountain. There are no second chances. The sheer audacity of carving 4 colossi, perfectly symmetrical, out of a cliff face is enough to stagger the mind. But the true impossibility of Abu Simbel isn't the statues outside. It is the machine inside. You walk between the feet of the giants, feeling like an insect, and enter the sanctuary. The air instantly changes. It is cool, stale, and smells of dry stone and bats. You are walking into the heart of the mountain, nearly 200 feet deep. The corridor is lined with more statues, standing sentinels in the gloom. At the very back of the temple, in the Holy of Holies, sit 4 statues. The gods Ra-Harakti, Amun-Ra, the deified Ramses himself, and Ptah. Ptah is the god of darkness, the creator of the underworld. For most of the year, these 4 figures sit in absolute pitch-black darkness. The sun passes over the desert, indifferent to them. But the engineers who carved this cave understood the sky better than we do. They knew the precise angle of the Earth's tilt. They knew the exact speed of the sun's drift across the horizon. Twice a year, on October 22nd and February 22nd, allegedly the pharaoh's birthday and coronation day, a miracle happens. It is a slow, cinematic event that no special effect can replicate. As the sun rises over the Nile, a single beam of light pierces the doorway. It travels nearly 200 feet down the central axis, like a laser made of gold. It bypasses the pillars. It ignores the walls. It strikes the statue of Amun-Ra, lighting him up. Then it moves to Ramses, illuminating the king's face in a divine glow. Then it touches Rahorakti. For 20 minutes, the gods burn with light in the centre of the dark mountain. But here is the genius. The light never touches Ptah. The god of darkness remains in the shadow, sitting right next to the illuminated king. A calculated miss, an error of 1 degree in the alignment of the entrance, a deviation of a few inches in the carving of the corridor, and the light would hit the wall or illuminate the wrong god. But it doesn't. For 3,000 years, the mountain has functioned as a clock, accurate to the minute. This is engineering as astronomy. It required a knowledge of the solar cycle that feels impossible for a civilization without telescopes. They didn't just build a temple, they anchored the mountain to the solar system. The psychological impact on a pilgrim standing there in 1200 BC must have been shattering. To see the sun obey the pharaoh, to see the light seek him out in the darkness, was proof that the universe itself was part of the Egyptian state. But as we leave the dry, preserved air of Egypt, we must travel west, across the ocean and forward in time, to a place where the humidity is thick enough to drink, and the jungle is constantly trying to eat the ruins. Welcome to the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. It is hot, sticky and loud, with the calls of tropical birds. You are standing at the base of El Castillo, the temple of Kukulkan in Chichen Itza. It looks like a simple pyramid, a stack of 9 square terraces rising to a temple at the top. But this is not just a pile of stones. It is a physical manifestation of time itself. The Maya were obsessed with time. They tracked cycles of thousands of years with a precision that rivals modern atomic clocks. And they built their obsession into this structure. Count the steps. There are 91 steps on each of the 4 sides. That's 364. Add the platform at the top, and you get 365. The pyramid is a calendar made of limestone. But like Abu Simbel, the true magic of El Castillo is only revealed by the sun. On the spring and autumn equinoxes, thousands of people gather on the lawn. They wait for late afternoon. As the sun begins to set, the shadows of the pyramid's terraced corners are cast onto the northern balustrade. At first, it just looks like a jagged line of shade. But as the sun sinks lower, the triangles of light link up. They form a body, a glowing, undulant body of light connecting to the massive stone serpent head at the base of the stairs. It is the feathered serpent, Kukulkan, descending from the heavens to the earth. It is a moving picture, an animation created by the rotation of the planet and the precise placement of stone blocks. If the pyramid were rotated a few degrees, the shadow wouldn't fall correctly. If the terraces were a few inches taller or shorter, the serpent's body would be broken. This isn't just architecture, it is performance art on a geological scale. But the Maya engineers didn't stop at light. They also mastered sound. Stand at the base of the pyramid's staircase. Clap your hands, once. Sharp and loud. The sound travels up the stairs, hits the limestone temple at the top and bounces back. But it doesn't come back as a clap. It comes back as a chirp. A distinct descending pew-oop sound. It sounds exactly, and I mean exactly, like the call of the Quetzal bird, the sacred bird of the Maya. This is not a coincidence. Acoustical engineers have studied the geometry of the stairs. The height and depth of the steps are tuned to filter the sound waves of a hand clap and return only the specific frequencies that mimic the bird. Imagine the scene 1,000 years ago. The high priest stands at the top of the pyramid. The crowd stands below in silence. The priest claps, and the pyramid answers with the voice of a god. The stone itself speaks. It is a terrifying display of control over the senses. To build a structure that aligns with the sun is one thing. To build one that manipulates sound waves to mimic nature is a level of sophistication that borders on wizardry. These structures, Abu Simbel, Chichen Itza, they make us feel that civilization is a steady climb, that we started primitive and got smarter. But there is one place that breaks that timeline, one place that shouldn't exist. To find it, we have to go back, way back, before the Maya, before the Egyptians, before the wheel, before pottery, before farming. We are going to the Anatolian region of Turkey, to a dusty hilltop called Göbekli Tepe. The year is 9500 BC. The Ice Age has just ended. Humans are hunter-gatherers. We live in small nomadic bands. We sleep in temporary shelters. We use stone tools. We haven't domesticated wheat yet. We are, according to the textbooks, simple. And yet, here on this hill, people are doing something impossible. They are carving T-shaped limestone pillars. These aren't small stones. They weigh up to 20 tons. They are 18 feet tall, and they are arranging them in perfect circles. There is no city here, no houses, no water source. This is a cathedral built by people who hadn't invented the concept of a room yet. Walk through the site. It is baffling. The pillars are incredibly smooth, carved with relief sculptures of animals. Lions, scorpions, vultures, spiders. The craftsmanship is refined, confident. This isn't the work of amateurs. This is the work of master artisans. But where did they live? How did they feed the hundreds of workers needed to move these 20-ton blocks without agriculture? Standard history says that agriculture came first, allowing people to settle down, create a surplus of food, and then organize religion and build temples. Göbekli Tepe flips the table. It suggests that the temple came first, that the urge to build something sacred, something impossible, was the spark that forced us to invent farming just to feed the builders. Religion didn't come from civilization. Civilization came from the need to build a house for the gods. The implications are vertigo-inducing. The builders of Göbekli Tepe filled these circles in with rubble and built new ones on top, layer after layer, for thousands of years. And then, around 8000 BC, they deliberately buried the entire site and walked away. Why? We don't know. But the existence of this site proves that the capacity for impossible engineering is not a product of technology. It is a product of the human mind. It has been there since the beginning, waiting for a reason to wake up. As we look back at the journey we have taken tonight, from the wave-battered concrete of Rome to the swaying grass ropes of the Andes, from the heavy stones of Baalbek to the chirping pyramids of the Maya, we are left with a strange feeling. It is not just admiration. It is a kind of grief, because we realise that for all our modern technology, for all our steel and glass and digital clouds, we have lost something. We have lost the long view. We build for the next fiscal quarter. They built for the next millennium. They built as if they were going to live forever, even though they knew they would die. But stone is patient. It waits. The Alcantara Bridge still carries traffic. The sun still finds Ramses in his mountain. The shadow serpent still descends every equinox, even if the crowds holding up their smartphones don't fully understand the math behind it. These structures are messages in bottles thrown into the ocean of time. They are whispering to us. They are saying, we were here, we were strong, and we are still standing. But there is one final question, a question that hangs over every ruin like a storm cloud. If these civilizations were so advanced, so brilliant, so capable of bending the earth to their will, where are they? Why did the Inca collapse? Why did the Maya abandon their cities to the jungle? Why did Rome fall? The stones survived, yes, but the people didn't. The engineering was perfect, but the society was fragile. And as we lay in the dark tonight, safe in our modern homes, we have to wonder, what will be left of us in 2,000 years? Will our concrete turn to dust? Will our steel rust away? Or will we leave behind something that makes the future wonder, how did they do that? Perhaps the ultimate lesson of Impossible Bridges isn't about how to cross a river. It's about how to cross time. It's about the bridge between the living and the dead. And as we cross that bridge now, moving from the waking world into the world of dreams, we can take comfort in the solidity of the past. The stones are holding us up. The arch is locked. The tension is balanced. The work is done. You can rest now. The bridge will hold. We ended the last chapter asking where they went. We stood in the dust of Turkey, wondering how civilizations that could chart the stars and move mountains simply vanished. But the truth is, not everyone vanished. Some went deeper. Some realized that the only way to survive a hostile world wasn't to build up toward the sun, but to dig down into the dark. If Göbekli Tepe was a temple to the sky, our next destination is a monument to fear. We are leaving the open air behind completely. We are travelling to the volcanic plains of Cappadocia in central Turkey, to a place called Derinkuyu. On the surface, it looks like a barren, wind-swept plateau, but beneath your feet lies a secret that defies belief. In 1963, a man knocked down a wall in his basement renovating his house. Behind it, he found a tunnel, and that tunnel led to another, and another. He had discovered an entrance to a subterranean city that plunges 18 stories deep into the earth. This isn't a cave. It is a metropolis carved out of soft volcanic tuff. It could house 20,000 people. Livestock, food stores, wine presses, schools, chapels, all hidden in the eternal night of the underground. Walking through Derinkuyu is a claustrophobic nightmare for the modern mind, but a masterpiece of survival engineering for the ancient one. The ventilation shafts are the key. They go down nearly 200 feet, piercing every level to bring fresh air from the surface. The air circulation is so perfect that even at the bottom, 18 stories down, your torch burns bright and the air smells fresh. How did they calculate the airflow dynamics without fluid mechanics? We don't know, but they did, and they built it for defence. The corridors are narrow, forcing invaders to walk single file. At key intersections, there are massive circular stone doors, millstones weighing 1/2 ton, that can only be rolled shut from the inside. This is impossible engineering, not because of the size of the stones, but because of the psychology of the design. It is architecture built on the premise that the surface world is death. It is a bunker built before the concept of bombs existed. Living here meant months of darkness. It meant listening to the muffled sounds of armies marching above your head, knowing they couldn't find you. It is the ultimate act of introversion. While the Romans and Egyptians were shouting their power with monuments, the people of Derinkuyu were whispering their survival in the dark. It reminds us that human ingenuity isn't just about glory. Sometimes it is about the desperate, clawing need to simply stay alive. But survival requires more than just hiding. It requires stability, and sometimes the ground itself is your enemy. We travel now to the steaming jungles of Cambodia, to the largest religious monument ever built, Angkor Wat. You see the 5 lotus bud towers rising above the canopy, the endless bas-reliefs, the sandstone grandeur. But the miracle of Angkor isn't the stone, it's the water. The temple is heavy, millions of tons of sandstone, and it is built on a swamp. In any other place, this temple would have sunk into the mud and cracked apart centuries ago. But the Khmer engineers did something brilliant. They didn't drain the swamp, they disciplined it. Look at the massive moat that surrounds the temple complex. It is rectangular, wide, and perfectly geometric. Tourists think it is for decoration, or perhaps defence. It isn't. It is a structural device. The moat ensures that the groundwater level beneath the temple remains constant year-round. In the monsoon season, it absorbs the excess water so the ground doesn't liquefy. In the dry season, it feeds water back into the soil so the foundation doesn't shrink and crack. The temple is literally floating on a controlled cushion of water. It is a hydraulic machine disguised as a house for the gods. If the moat dries up, Angkor Wat falls down. The engineers understood soil mechanics in a way that rivals modern geotechnical science. They realised that the building and the landscape had to be one single organism. And finally, we must look at the chemistry of endurance. We go north to the winding dragon of stone that cuts across the mountains of China, the Great Wall. We know it's long, we know it's old, but have you ever looked closely at the mortar holding the bricks together? It is white, incredibly hard, and nearly waterproof. For years, scientists couldn't figure out why sections of the Great Wall were still standing while modern concrete buildings crumbled. They analysed the mortar and found a secret ingredient that sounds like a joke, but is actually pure chemical genius: sticky rice. The Ming Dynasty engineers mixed slaked lime with soup made from glutinous rice. The amylopectin in the rice, a type of starch, acted as an inhibitor. It controlled the growth of calcium carbonate crystals, creating a microstructure that was tighter, more flexible, and more resistant to water than pure lime mortar. It was the world's first composite material. Organic and inorganic chemistry fused together. This sticky rice mortar was so strong that in some places the bricks will break before the mortar does. It bound the empire together, quite literally, with the food that fed its people. It is a humbling thought. The greatest defensive structure in human history, the Shield of China, is held together by dinner. So, who really built these impossible structures? Was it aliens? Was it giants? No. The answer is far more uncomfortable. It was us. It was human beings, genetically identical to you and me, but operating with a different operating system. They didn't have our distractions. They didn't have our fragmented attention spans. They possessed a deep time perspective that we have lost. They were willing to start projects that they knew they would never see finished. They were willing to be a single link in a chain of generations. The stone of Baalbek, the light of Abu Simbel, the grass ropes of the Andes, the sticky rice of China. These are not mysteries. They are mirrors. They show us what humans are capable of when we are pushed to the edge of our limits by faith, by fear, or by the sheer need to survive. They remind us that we are a species of builders. We are the animals that stack stones. We are the creatures that look at a river and say, no. We look at a mountain and say, move. And this leads us to the final realization of the night. The reason these structures feel impossible to us is not because we couldn't build them. We have cranes that can lift 800 tons. We have lasers that can align with the stars. We could build a great pyramid today. But we wouldn't. We lack the why. We lack the terrifying, singular focus of a pharaoh who believes he is a god. We lack the communal desperation of a village that needs a bridge to survive the winter. We have traded permanence for convenience. We have traded eternity for speed. But tonight, as you drift off to sleep, remember that the bedrock beneath you is the same bedrock that holds up the Great Wall. The stars you cannot see through your ceiling are the same stars that align with Chichen Itza. The capacity for the impossible is still there, dormant in our DNA. We are the descendants of the people who tied grass into bridges and mixed rice into stone. We carry their genius in our hands, even if we mostly use them to swipe on screens. The bridges are still standing. The temples are still watching the sun. The underground cities are still waiting in the dark. They have done their job. They have carried the memory of their makers across the abyss of time to reach you, right here, right now. And now that the message has been delivered, the weight can be lifted, the stone can rest, and so can you. The impossible has been achieved. The work is done. The engineers have gone home. Good night.